Yeah, I'm pretty happy to be here. This is where I was supposed to start. So I come from Gapminder. We are a non-profit in Sweden, and we work for a fact-based worldview that everyone can understand. Most likely you just heard that, but in German, which made it easier for you to understand maybe, but I didn't get that you heard that, so I say it now in English. So I was the one asking the questions to you in the beginning, and the reason for that is that we have figured out that when we want to promote a fact-based worldview, we usually use very colorful slides. And if we don't humiliate our audience and have them answer some questions, they always think that the problem with knowledge about the global trends are for others, because they, of course, know it. But when we started humiliating the audience by actually asking the audience the same kind of questions, very often it turns out that they didn't know either. So I'm going to start by just doing that very briefly so you get an idea. We have something we call our ignorance test. And the questions you got, 3 of them was from that test. The first one, how many of the world's 1-year-old children today have been vaccinated against some disease? 80% is the correct answer. In Germany, which is the country that we have been asking this question, I should tell you, in 12 countries. And Germany was the one that geographically was closest to you. So therefore, we're going to compare with our results in Germany. In Germany, 6% got this question right. This is the results from other countries. And if they would just have guessed without reading the question, they would have ended up somewhere along the chimp line, because it's 3 answer alternatives, and just picking one without really thinking about it would actually make statistically ending up there. But people don't, right? So let's see how you did. Here is your result. 15%. You're on par with Australia, Canada, and UK. Halfway through to the chimp, where you would just have guessed, right? Then we have this one. That is about how many years women have gone to school. So the right answer is 9 years, almost as long as men, actually. And in Germany, 25% actually got this right. And the results are divided like this. You see Korea and Hungary are getting close to guessing, but would still have been better off if they would just have picked an answer without reading. And then what about you? Oh, on par with Korea. And then we have this one. How many kids will there be in year 2100 according to the UN? This is the right answer. Same as today. Germans, 9% got it right. This is the results in the world, in the countries we tested. And this is your score. Pretty good. This is like you almost knew it. So I got warned before doing that in front of you, because they said, no, but this audience will know this, and this audience they know about this test, so you will get very good results. And I think this one was pretty good, right? So when we ask this, we've been asking this to audiences in 12 countries, a total of 14,000 people. And then the question comes, how many rights do people usually get? So 0 correct answers, 15% of the people answering our poll got 0% right, not a single question right. And all of them have 3 alternatives. And this is how the results are actually divided. And look at the far top. Here, 11 results. This is in Swedish, unfortunately. 1, it means. 1 person got 11 right. And that person was a Swede. We don't know who, of course, but it's 1. And ingen means nobody. So nobody got all correct answers. 15% got no right at all. And 1 got 11. Just so you get the idea. So by just guessing, this is where we should have been. But it's only 10% that is actually better than a chimp. And that's pretty bad in a knowledge society, isn't it? But compare with this one. we also have asked this question. We don't use it in our test. It's just a control question. It's about the climate. Will the temperature, blah, 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 you know? And here, look at these results. Here, information has actually worked. People know something about the climate, but they know barely nothing about anything else. So we have a pretty big task still to solve. This one, I think, is just pretty fascinating. Here, this is from a study done by Ipsos, and basically asking, what do you think other people in your country, how do you think they perceive themselves as being happy or not? And actually, 85% of the Germans perceive themselves as being happy or very happy. And what did you think then? Well, 23% of you. So you have very negative ideas about what people think about themselves, right? And this is also pretty interesting, because if we try to foresee the future, and we think that people are very gloomy, and we think the world is going to go really bad, this is basically when we look at these estimations about if you think that others in your country are happy, everyone underestimates how the others are answering. Pretty interesting. On this question, I think the world is getting worse. Look at these results. I mean, a majority of people think that the world is actually getting worse. And we think that people around us are less happy than they are actually think they are themselves. And we think when we ask these questions about the world, people always tend to pick the worst alternative. Doesn't matter what we ask, but they pick the worst one. So people are pretty gloomy. And how can we understand the world when we think it's much, much worse than it actually is? And how can we even understand the future when we're so wrong about today? So how is it today then? Well, here's the world. There are 7 billion people in the world today. 1 billion live in the Americas, 1 in Africa, 1 in Europe, and 4 in Asia. Pretty basic, but pretty good to know. We actually ask this question as well in our knowledge test, and nobody knows this either. And then, moving into the future, this is actually to remember the world today. Think of it as a PIN code, 1114, pretty easy. And then we go to the future, and this is what is predicted. 3 more billions in Africa and 1 more billion in Asia. If we divide US, or basically the Americas, into US and South, and we do West and East in Europe, and we take these that we usually call the West, in 2100, we will be 8% of the world population. Pretty important to remember when planning for the future. 92% will be in somewhere else, around the Indian Ocean. And this is what the population will look like. Before, historically, 2 parents had about 6 kids. But this is what happened. A lot of the kids died. That is what we call the old balance. And when we move forward, we started to figure out ways of actually getting kids to survive, and fewer kids died, which meant the population started growing pretty fast. Now, that is no balance phase. And now, we are in a phase of new balance, actually meaning that a couple of parents, on average, get around 2 kids, still a little bit more, but somewhere around there, and the population will not grow. So it will actually flatten off into the future, and that we call the new balance. So we can see this. This is the world population today. We do it as a house like this. There are more young people than old. We have 15-year intervals, so we have the kids at the bottom. So what's happening every 15 years? Here, first the old ones die. That's pretty sad, but true. And then the other ones grow up, and they get kids down there, you saw? And then, actually, the population has grown with 1 more billion. You see? Because we're basically filling up these empty spots in the top of the pyramid. We do it 1 more time. Get kids. And now we're 9 billion in 2045. Same happens again, 2060. We're up to 10 billion. But see now we're as many people, same amount of people on all these floors. So now what's going to happen is actually we live a bit longer, so there will be more people up here. But then nothing more is going to happen. It's just going to repeat. That is what UN actually predicts for the future. Because when we think about the future, we tend to think that there will be loads and loads and loads of new kids that will make the population grow. But even if the population, as the number of kids now is 2.4 about per family, the population growth of the future is actually the already born are going to grow up and sort of fill up the top of the pyramid. So here we can see, this is all the countries of the world today. And on this axis, we have how long you're supposed to live, and on that axis, how wealthy you are. Each bubble is a country. The color is what region it's in, and the size is how many people live in the country. Just look briefly at this one. This is what it looks today. If we go, you see the year in the background. Let's go back to year 1800. No one in year 1800 lived on even the worst situation today. And if we play this over time, I'm just going to drag briefly. See here? Here you can see something starts happening. Some countries are about to appear here in the window. See how they are changing. Constant change. And most of it are actually moving up to that corner, being healthy and rich. If we zoom out, like this, and we do it again, briefly, now when you can see the countries down here, we can actually zoom in a little bit, like this. And now we do the same. See, back then, all countries were down there, and then things starts happening. You see? And this is actually the major thing we've been working on for so long, making all these data bubbles moving interactively and so forth, so you can start doing analysis on that. But what happens is a very sad thing, namely this one. Even if we try to make the data moving, colorful, easy to find, free, and so forth, there's a lot of people that still recognizes that this is actually numbers. And there are so many people who hate statistics, so we cannot really reach everyone by doing that. So we have noticed that a lot of people don't go to the places where you find statistics, rather they watch the news. So what do you see in the news if you want to understand the world? You see gloomy things, usually, right? Disasters, war, refugees, diseases, weird cultures, holiday beaches, nice animals, strange cultures. And then you take all of these and you should form a worldview. But it becomes very weird because we only have seen strange things, right? So therefore, we started a project that we call the Dollar Street. Basically, how can we help people understand the world without seeing the numbers, really? And without looking at the news, but still getting the sense of being something more news-like. So we started Dollar Street, which is a pretty simple concept. But before going to that, I just realized today that, ta-da, today is actually Dollar Street's first birthday. 1 year ago, we launched it. So it has been out there for 1 year. So I needed to add the balloons. So now we're going to see here. So the whole concept is actually very easy. Imagine the world as a street. And you have the poorest to the left, the richest to the right. Oh, this happened to be in Swedish. Stupid me. Poor, rich. This is a language course. And then you have in between, it says in the middle. And then world population, 7 billion. So that is the whole concept. This is how people spread out. And we have asked people in different countries and students where they think they belong. And when we ask Swedish students, they think that they belong here on a global income distribution. They think they are in the middle, while they are up here. By just living in Sweden, they will end up in that one. And when you think you're in the middle, you think everyone else are unhappier than they are, and you think the world is getting worse. pretty hard to understand the future. So therefore, we are not talking so much about the future. We try to focus on what is here and now and what has been. So what we have started doing then for the Dollar Street project is sending out photographers to homes all over the world on different income levels. In these homes, we look at how people sleep, how they cook, and what they play with. So this is what it looks like. So you can see the street at the top, right? It says families in the world by income. You see the street, and then you see some families. So far, we have been visiting like 260 families in 50 countries, and they are down here. And they are ordered by income. So poorer families to the left and richer to the right. And basically, you can see that they are not ordered by where they are in the world. Here we have Burundi, Tunisia, Russia, Latvia. And here we have India, Cameroon, Indonesia, Jordan, and so forth. What we can do now is that we can go here and we can actually pick something. So let's go to beds, for instance. Then we can instantly go and look at beds at different incomes, because we tagged the photos by the family income, so it becomes comparable. And actually a bit more complicated. It's an index, but anyhow, sort of income. And what you can do now, remember that the Swedish students, they thought they were in the middle, and now you can smartly enough just filter here, and then you can see if they would actually recognize their bedrooms, and they would probably say no, it's not a typical Swedish bedroom. While if you go up here, then it's pretty much it, right? Here you have China, Netherlands, US, Latvia, and so forth, a lot of different bedrooms. And what you can do now, you can go here and either choose what countries you're looking for, or you can change here. I'm going to go for toilets, which I usually do because I have the chance. You're never allowed to do this, but here you can. So you can go sneak into other homes and look at their toilets. See, they look pretty much the same, this porcelain water closet things. But remember, we're just at the top here. So by scrolling out the income, and hoping that the internet is here, yes, then you can see what it really looks like. This is a more representative image of toilets around the world, where we can see that the 1 billion using a bush or a field as a toilet are actually represented. See here, if I go to Google, let's go and see toilets at Google. This is what you get, right? Because people tend to tell me, why do you send out photographers? You can just crowdsource. You know, everything is out there. But it's not, because what you find at Google or any other source is actually a skewed imagery from the richest part of the world. So you get the point. But not everything works as a photo. So we also ask a lot of questions in the homes. How long time do you go and fetch water? How often do you have electricity outages? Do you own your building? How many sleeps here? And so forth. What do you work with? And so on. So we can get an idea about the family income and so. And then some things works better as activities, so then we do videos. Here, for instance, we can see toothbrushing. We start at the top of the street. See how everyone are using a similar kind of plastic toothbrush. It's pretty universal to brush your teeth. Some are very serious, but otherwise it's pretty much the same thing. When we come down to the poorer end, people stop being able to afford even a plastic toothbrush, and they can start using a stick, maybe, or even their finger. So in Dollar Street, this image, this is not only tagged as her wall, which it is, it's also tagged as her toothbrush, because it is also, no, toothpaste, because she's using this to scrape off some material to brush her teeth. And then we can use the toothbrushing and say, in the poorer end of the street, you use your finger or a stick. In the middle, you start having a toothbrush. And at the top, you start having one each. So, then we can look here. If we look at the income distribution of US is on the top of the street. We can zoom in, and we can see a family living in the richest 20% of the US, the Howards. This is their home. And we can compare it to another US family living in the lower end of the American income distribution. And we can look into their cutlery drawers and see the huge difference if you're in the richer or the poorer end within the same country. We can add one more family that is somewhat in the middle, and we can see the gradual change. Small plastic box, a wooden drawer specifically for cutlery, and a wooden drawer with small drawers within. We can look at kitchen sinks, living rooms, and so forth. We can do the same in China. 3 homes, 3 families, their houses, sofas, cooking. And usually when we think about countries, we use these country stereotypes, saying, this is how they cook in China. But we always have to remember the huge variation within countries. The cool part is when we start comparing. So we can see China and the US, 2 families we just saw in the upper end. And we can look into their bedrooms, pretty similar. They both have brown leather sofas. And they have almost identical play structures. Usually, I guess it's because both are made in China, but it's like pretty similar. Yeah. And we can do the same in the other end as well, actually. So comparing China and Nigeria, we have 2 families here. They don't look to have much in common, do they? But look at their ceiling, or chairs, or how they store grains, or the dinner, or how they cook their water. Pretty much the same. And very often we tend to talk about, if we would have traveled to any of these homes, we would have taken photos and brought it back to our families and friends and said that this is how they cook in China, or this is how they cook in Nigeria, which is not true, because this is how you cook on this income level. Has nothing to do with China or Nigeria. So a quick walkthrough. Here we're going to look at the poor. Yeah, now you know the Swedish. Fattig is poor, rich is rik. And then we're going to look at the poorest. So I'm going to show you a couple of comparisons where we look at the same thing, but we look at 2 images all the time from different regions of the world. Beds, roofs, see natural materials for the ceilings, cook over open fire, might not have shoes, might eat with your hands, storing of salt in Asia, Papua New Guinea, and Burundi in Africa looks similar, or using the bush or field as a toilet would be same experience in Nepal or Nigeria. If we go to the middle, which is a pretty big group here, but anyhow, we can see you start having electricity, you will no longer sleep on the floor, try to come up from the floor, salt is now stored in a container. The cutlery, you have more than one, and they are stored in something. I think it's cute here with the flowers and the trees. And then the pens, you have these corrugated iron roofs, shoes, phones, toys, and waste, starting to produce waste on this level. And then we can go up to our level where we are comfortable. And this is what it looks like. Shoes, sofas, fruits, hairbrushes, bookshelves, toilet paper, wardrobes, lamps, dogs, floor, soap, laundry, clocks, computers, iPhones. Pretty much the same, even though we are in so different places. So the images we get in the media doesn't really look like people's everyday life, does it? So I'm just going to show you briefly here. Yeah, here you see what it looks like if you Google. You see the toilets, stoves, beds, and the sofas, for instance. So what we do now is actually that we write a book. And the book is about how wrong people are about the world, how the world actually looks, and how you can do to train your brain to compensate for all the stupid ways it processes information. This is what we do now. And the book, whoops, and the main thing here is that we talk about 10 dramatic instincts. And I'm going to show you them to you quite briefly. The first one, the gap instincts, our brain says to us, oh, it's huge differences all the time, and we see poor and rich, and we see this kind of debates and stuff. But you should always, it's like rules of thumb, you should always look for the majority. In media, you always get the outliers and the extremes, but everything happens in the majority. This is what, you should remember the blue texts, okay? And then we always hear, it's just getting worse. But would an improvement get publicity? Probably not. And this is not what news look like, do they? Yesterday, all trains were in time again. The timetable is slightly improved. No plane crashes today either. I mean, this is not what it looks like, because we always get these drastic messages. So we should remember that we never see anything getting good or slow changes. Straight line. When we see a line, we think it's just going to continue. But we have to remember that many lines bend. For instance, here, when we have a newborn, they already have this pre-drawn length charts for babies, because it's not going to continue straight. Then they would be like 2 meters long when they are 4 years old. It would be ridiculous. And we know that's not going to happen. But when it comes to facts about the world, that's how people think it's going to be. Then we have the fear. Help, help, help. We're afraid all the time, but we have to calculate the risks. Here, for instance, when Hindenburg went down, the reason the passenger traffic stopped was because someone got to catch a photo of it by accident. A lot of more people died on a previous accident, but that happened over the ocean where no one saw. So then the passenger traffic continued. But when this image came, no one could fly on it anymore. And then we have the size. It's a huge problem. We hear it all the time. But we should remember to compare and divide. So when we see this number, 4 million dead infants, it's horrible, right? But look at the year before. Then it was even more. Or going back to the 50s, then it was much worse. And it's so hard for us to keep these proportions right. And then we have the generalizations. When we think about other people, we tend to think that they are strange. But we should think, what problems are they trying to solve? Here, for instance, we have all seen this when we have these refugees coming to Europe in the boats. But I don't know if you knew this, but this one I think is the most exciting one. This one of the boats happened to end up at a nudist beach in Spain. And I think this is the most wonderful situation. You're fleeing for your life to get a new start, and you end up on a nudist beach. Probably no one had told them that that could happen, right? So I'm just wondering what's happening here. Who are the craziest on this beach, right? And then we have the destiny, that we tend to think that everything will stay as it has always been. But most things are actually moving slowly, slowly, slowly. Here, for instance, pretty recently, we have Polish women trying to come to Sweden to do abortions because they are not allowed in their home country, And now it says that it's too expensive and they barely can afford it. But it's hard to remember that in the 60s, it was the other way around. Then Swedes went on secret abortion trips to Poland. But that we all have forgotten, and we think it's like our long-lasting Swedish values. We have always been very open and always had this, So it's very hard to remember. And also when we come to marketing, we are so proud when we have these old, we're so proud of our European heritage or Silicon Valley or whatever, and we try to brand it all by this. But if you go to Asia and talk to people there, they are not very interested to work in a company that is like, ooh, it's the Alps on our Toblerone, because they're proud about their Asian local culture as well. So I think we have to rethink there. And then we usually think we have a single solution. We have our ideologies, and we think we can solve everything with that solution. But wow, it's magic. That's what we're going to think each time. Because look here, for instance. Here, we have 5 different countries, and this is how much money they spend on health in each country as percentage of GDP. Look at them. 5 different ones. They get the same results on completely different levels of spending. So all of them have followed one path, and it seems like it's discussable, debatable whether the United States took the right one. And then blame, it was him. We do that all the time in media. We always see all these blame stories, and I just have to show that for you to know what I mean. But I think to be constructive and be able to think about the world, we have to think about other explanations, because we get so blinded when we have this blame mentality. And we tend to think about the future, that it's now or never. We have to act now. But usually, one step at a time is the way to go. This is my favorite gang of people. It's the Chicago Convention, they're called, and it's the opposite of this very cool, very drastic thing. It's like a convention where they wrote some rules for how to control flight accidents, to get flight accidents to go down. And this is what actually has happened, because you know, the black boxes and stuff. So they have a very strict way of reporting, and by doing that, a very slow, very bureaucratic, and very, you know, non-sexy thing, they actually manage to control and change the behavior over time. So using these rules of thumb can actually help. But it's not the only thing to get to understand the world, because we also need a framework. So when we get new information in, we have to put it in some kind of an overview to understand what's happening. And this is actually my last piece of advice here. We should have warning text. This is like, yeah, it's an old one, but, you know, I know, but like on cigarettes, media can cause stress and bad decisions. And actually, you know, on the new one, on the new idea that we should have bigger, you know, cigarette frightening images. And what if we apply that to the tabloids and to the, you know, then we should be something like this, where we should actually learn how to do things. So if you want to get the world more right, I would suggest that you go and take our Gapminder test on our website, 12 simple questions, and you've already done 3 of them, and you've seen 5 of them, and you know that basically answering the positive result, the best result would probably be the thing, right? Then you can get this fancy diploma sent to you by mail, like these people did. Yes. So thank you, and you can write an email or something if you want to talk further. And I hope that was almost 5 minutes. 5, 6. Thank you.